because the philosophy is the important tool here, Dick. You know, the kicking and punching is only the vehicle to strengthen that individual as a person, to raising their self-esteem, raising their self-worth, teaching them how to focus their lives in the proper way, in the most positive way, teaching them the philosophy of goal seeking and realizing that there's obstacles in any goal you want to pursue and having that determination to overcome those obstacles, to reach those goals. See, this is all part of the training of the martial arts.
Hello everyone, this is Speaker Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video review, and it is with deep sadness that we have to acknowledge the fact that movie actor and very much action legend in Chuck Norris has passed away at the age of 86 years old. The news was confirmed a couple of hours ago in the early afternoon of Friday the 20th of March 2026, and although the actual cause of death hasn't been confirmed, it likely was related to the recent accidents that he incurred whilst horse riding, and he was rushed to emergency hospital in Hawaii a couple of days ago. His family released a statement earlier today stating that he was surrounded by his family at the time of his passing. Now, since then, of course, a whole host of tributes and condolences have been given and referenced from many movie fans and pundits and critics and other actors and celebrities alike. And very much rightly so, for when we talk about Chuck Norris, we are talking about a true cult action movie legend and icon. And whilst he may not have been a major mainstream commercial box office superstar or the world's greatest actor, he was without question a truly memorable and integral and very much beloved figure, particularly from his prolific stages and prominence throughout the late 1970s and 1980s, where his movie career was really at its height. And no doubt about it, Chuck Norris was very much a fabric of the B-level action movie genre from the 1980s, which is still today one of the most impressionable movie eras within all of cinema, that defines so much of a movie fan generation. And growing up, people, including myself, spent hours and hours watching VHS tapes of movies starring the likes of Chuck Norris, and just being embraced and inspired by the action fantasy that figures like he would present. In terms of very much the one-man action army, we would love seeing him take on various villains and enemies and antagonists single-handedly, with nothing but himself and a whole host of weaponry and martial arts moves. And it was just great to see, great to really immerse again in that sense of escapism and adventure, and very much heroism that I believe is so much lost in today's movie culture. And Chuck Norris was very much a masculine and testosterone movie archetype that you could very much look up to and take inspiration from. And when we compare to his other action contemporaries, I think Chuck Norris was very much more of a minimalist performer. In terms of his overall acting, he was one of those actors very similar to Charles Brosnan, where it was less about his overall range of emotions that was very limited. It was more about his aura, his screen presence. And I think, again, harking back to that era from the 1980s, what made movie stars like Chuck Norris so special was indeed their screen presence, their screen aura. So when you would see him involved in all of these fight scenes and action sequences, you believed that somebody like Chuck Norris could single-handedly take down 10 people single-handedly. And that is really down to the presence and also very much the demeanour that he had, much more effective in his movements, in his physicality, rather than his overall acting range. And some movie stars have that. They have that natural screen presence and that screen demeanour that just leaves an overall impression, and I think Chuck Norris was very much one of those actors from the action movie genre. So when we go back over his career, we reference his birth back in the 19th of March 1940 in Ryan, Oklahoma. Early on in his life, he joined the United States Air Force in 1958 as an air policeman, and he would later on relocate to the South Korean base, where indeed this is where he started off his first martial arts training. After being discharged from the forces in 1962, he did apply to be a police officer, whilst also opening a martial arts studio, and this is when he started to participate in martial arts competition. And this is when he forged his career to a very successful karate martial arts champion, winning various titles and black belts and tournaments over the course of his career. And this again, which what would really add to his legacy overall as a movie actor. And it was during this time, as a prominent karate martial arts champion, that he would go on to meet the other cultural action movie icon in Bruce Lee. And this was very much indeed an alignment of the stars, as Chuck Norris's first real role was one of his most famous cinematic appearances, starring alongside Bruce Lee in the martial arts epic The Way of the Dragon from 1972. Playing the character of Colt, he was very much a minor character that reached action cultural resonance in the climatic iconic fight scene between both him and Bruce Lee's character Tang Lin, taking place in an isolated area very much resounding like a coliseum. It's a near 9-minute sequence of absolute epic, incredible fight staging and choreography. Still today, for me, the best movie fight sequence one-on-one of all time. So skilled and classic in its staging of the two participants, as we see them in the beginning doing their warm-up stretches. The more slender, lean, ripped Bruce Lee, very much more contrast with the much more heavier, bulkier, physically imposing Chuck Norris, their styles and fight stances. And the sequence is just absolutely magnificent, again trumping so many action movies today. And of course, at the time and post the release, it sparked great debates because of the fact that Chuck Norris was an established karate champion, and you had Bruce Lee's already transcendent martial arts movie icon status. We've had many debates during the release and post the release of this movie as to who exactly would win in the actual real fight. But despite all of this, The Way of the Dragon was indeed one of the biggest hits of 1972, and again was a major stage of the legacy of Chuck Norris. Now, Norris would go on to star later on in 70s movies such as Breaker Breaker and also The Good Guys Wear Black. But it was really the 1980s where he rose to prominence as a cult action movie star, starring in a multitude of movies produced by the very famous or infamous, depending on your perspective, Cannon Group and Globus Productions. We look at the whole run of movies such as Lone Wolf McQuade back in 1983, where he starred alongside David Carradine. We then reference the Missing in Action movie from 1984, where he played the character known as Colonel Braddock, who was a survivor of the capture within the Vietnam War conflict and who would later on return back to that area to rescue American POWs. And the concept here actually predated the likes of the Rambo First Blood Part 2, and this is where we were really in the midst of hugely prolific American movies covering around the territory of Vietnam. And as I mentioned before, this was where we saw really the genesis of the single man, one-man action army that would just take on a whole multitude of bad guys. Absolutely glorious in the pre-CGI era where we had real locations, real practical stunt works and real explosions. And again, Chuck Norris in these scenes was such emblematic of this great time within movies. And the Mission in Action series itself was successful enough to spawn 2 sequel installments. We then later on had Invasion USA in 1985, where he played the character of Colonel Agent Matt Hunter, who comes out of retirement to take on a whole group of guerrilla soldiers and vigilantes. We look at Delta Force in 1986, where he starred alongside another cinematic legend in Lee Marvin, and the two played the leaders of an elite special operations forces unit that itself spawned a sequel of Delta Force 2 in 1990. Now, whilst Norris, as I mentioned before, was a cult action favourite, he never quite achieved the huge box office heights of his contemporaries at the time, such as Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and to a lesser extent, Dolph Lundgren and also Steven Seagal. And his movie career itself became far less prolific throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s. However, he would return to mainstream impact, this time on television, in the series Walker, Texas Ranger, where he would play the role of Sergeant Cordell Walker, who we would see throughout the series taking down various criminals within the Texan region. Premiering back on the CBS network on April 21st, 1993, the series enjoyed a very successful run of overall 9 seasons and 203 episodes, coming to a close on May the 19th, 2001. And I myself have very good memories of watching the first couple of seasons of the series way back on the Sky One channel when it was broadcast back in the UK. And the series overall did enough to add a substantial legacy to Norris's career outside of the 80s movie action genre. And post that series itself, Norris seemed to become more famous within the internet through famous memes and posts, gaining various traction and status as the unbeatable fighting force. Many references at the time, very much creating this image of him of being able to survive and defeat any deadly force, whether it be in the real world or supernatural. And to be honest, I'm always very wary when action legacy actors such as Chuck Norris become renowned far more through internet memes and posts, because I just question the overall fandom at the time for all of their talk about Chuck Norris. Have they really seen or experienced the movies that he released during the time, or are they just more looking at 2 minute or 3 minute clips? This is something very similar to what we were seeing also with Nicolas Cage, for example. But despite that, none of that really damaged the overall legacy and image of Chuck Norris itself. Many people would argue that it actually enhanced him and kept him very relevant for the later stages of career. And of course, we would see him make cameos that were far more self-referential in the likes of both Dodgeball and, of course, later on in the Expendables 2 movie also. And Norris always seemed to be very well spoken of and regarded throughout various communities within the movie space and television also. You never really heard too much in terms of bad controversy or negative press surrounding the man. And again, that's a great testament to himself as a personality. He had a very loving family. And once more, it is a reminder of how somebody is able to share full recognition of their legacy and handle it with such amount of class and integrity. So again, it's just very sad news to have the passing away of one of the true action movie archetypes in Chuck Norris. It is yet another sharp reminder that as we progress further into this current generation, that these legendary actors and movie stars who are reaching the later phases of the career, we really do have to make sure that we appreciate them whilst they are still with us, because I really don't think that in this current time of movies that we are in now, we are really going to see the likes of Chuck Norris again in terms of his screen presence, his screen aura, and his overall legacy. And that's why we should really make sure that we pay proper tribute and reference and resonance to the recent passing of one of the all-time cult action movie legends in Chuck Norris, who once more sadly passed away at the age of 86 years old.